But then again, why should she? I had been gone for the past week. I was too angry, shocked, and blisteringly hurt to say anything. My reaction and expression was all I needed to say. I threw everything into an old oversized gym bag and stormed out of the bedroom. I was met by Bud, who had been standing outside eavesdropping. "Downstairs, a-hole," I ordered. As we got to the front door, Bud paused and turned towards me. "Patrick, I want your assurance that nothing will happen to Clarissa. As you can see, she's pretty upset. I really think one of us needs to stay with her. Let's think about her first, Pat." God, the condescension in his voice just made me want to punch him in his goddamn throat. "Clarissa will be fine, Bud, but you won't if you don't get the hell out of my house." Bud just looked at me for a few moments with the look on his face of a father disappointed in his insolent child. It made me want to cut off his eyelids. Finally, he turned towards Clarissa and said, "I'll call you soon, I promise." Then he tried to lean in for a kiss. "Don't," I warned, "don't do that. I don't give a shit what you do when I'm not around and away from this house, but I will not be disrespected by you two for one more minute. I swear to God, Bud, if you so much as blow her a kiss as you leave, I will rip the balls out of you and shove it up her throat. Don't try me." Reluctantly, Bud backed away and started toward the door. Clarissa didn't look at either of us. As I turned to leave myself, I stood at the doorway and just glared at her. She stood there still dressed in her little nightie. Any man in his right mind would have found her incredibly sexy and desirous. But all I could feel was the black emptiness of contempt. "By the way, Bud, I couldn't help but notice how you used my soon-to-be ex-wife as a human shield the minute I burst through my own front door. Funny seeing that as you now seem to be so concerned about her well-being. God, you are a pathetic excuse for a man." Bud said nothing, gave Clarissa one last look for goodbye, and headed out the door. The cold of the night matched my feelings as I walked the distance back to my car. Bud pulled out slowly and followed me to make sure that I didn't double back, just as he knew that I would be watching him, too. I drove the 10 miles back to Red River Falls and checked myself into the Skyline Drive Motel, one of the city's less reputable inns. The only thing missing was the hourly rate. As much as I hated to, I went ahead paid for the monthly rate of $300. Yeah, you can probably imagine what kind of a place it was for $300 a month. I just hoped they washed the sheets at least once a week. I threw all of my bags down on the bed and just slumped down in one of the dingy chairs and started weeping. All of my frustrations over the past 2 years came pouring out of me. All of the guilt and shame that I had felt over the past year over what had been going on between Caroline and I, the pointless arguments between Clarissa and I, and all of the emotional distance. It all came pouring out of me in that nasty motel room. The dreams of the future for my family and I living out in the country was now a distant memory. All of our plans lay in ruins. I had been grossly betrayed by the woman I loved and by a man that I had respected, admired, and loved as a friend. Sleep that night came in fits and was only aided with the purchase of a bottle of cheap wine downed in a plastic motel room cup. I didn't go overboard, but still drank nearly half the bottle that night. Not enough to get stupid drunk, but it was at least enough to take the edge off. I managed to crawl into the shower Sunday morning and make myself presentable. I took myself and all of my Catholic guilt to Mass at St. Matthew's that morning. I guess I wanted to be somewhere that I felt safe, a place I could start to heal and begin looking for answers. The overwhelming thought I had was what all of this was going to do to my sons. Their entire world was about to get ripped apart, and they didn't even know it yet. I had no idea what was going to happen, whether either one of us would be able to keep the acreage. Bud didn't strike me as a hobby farmer or rancher, but I had no idea what his ultimate plans were. I was pretty sure that they didn't involve me staying at the sheriff's department. How could he? He had every intention of leaving his own wife after next year's election and subsequently marrying my own wife. A plan was needed. I had to approach this in a methodical way. I had to start thinking like a cop and pursue all of this like a police investigation. I knew the who, the what, and the where for the most part. I still wanted to know the how and the why of it all. How had they been hiding this, and how did Bud plan to pull it all off? Why did Clarissa go along with it all, and what was her ultimate motive? I thought back to what Bud had said about Elmer Suggs. Elmer Suggs was an African-American gentleman who lived primarily in Red River Falls. I say primarily because he was homeless and generally just existed in Red River Falls. Elmer was in his late 60s, or so I guessed, and we had had dealings with him numerous times over the years, going all the way back to when I was still a member of Red River Falls PD. He was an extremely pleasant gentleman and had never once given me cause to get tough with him. He liked to smoke a little weed every now and then, which resulted in an occasional possession charge. He had also been caught trespassing and some misdemeanor breaking and entering in the past, almost all of which was so he could get into some place warm in the wintertime. Our local homeless shelter was small and could not house any one individual for more than a total of 4 months out of the year. But summers are short in this part of the country and winters are long. How Elmer had been able to keep himself alive this long was anyone's guess. When I was still a member of Red River Falls PD, I once arrested Elmer for vagrancy. Yes, it is still an actual crime. On a ridiculously cold winter night when the temperature had fallen to 35 degrees below zero with 35 to 40 miles per hour wind gusts. At least I knew that Elmer would be safe and warm that night, get a hot meal or two and have a place to sleep. Elmer wasn't mad at me for the arrest, and even asked if he could keep the prison blanket and pillow that we gave him. I just made sure our head jailer Bryce Evans knew about it and gave the okay. The local magistrate never pressed the charges at my request, so the arrest will never show up on his record. I decided to get in my cruiser and drive around Red River Falls that Sunday afternoon. My drive took me to or past all of Elmer Suggs' usual haunts. About 5 o'clock that evening, I finally found Elmer downtown shuffling past the YMCA on Taylor Street. I pulled my vehicle over and parked it. "Hey, Elmer," I shouted as I exited my vehicle. Elmer turned and looked at me as he kept on walking. I walked briskly to catch up to him. "Hey, Elmer, wait up a second." Elmer stopped when he realized that I wasn't going away. "Afternoon, Sheriff," he replied meekly. "It's okay, Elmer. You're not in trouble, I promise. I just want to talk to you for a little bit," I explained. "Yeah, okay, I suppose. Can we get someplace warm?" he asked in his thick urban accent. "Sure, Elmer. No problem." There was a small eatery, Otis Diner, right across from the YMCA. The Little Greasy Spoon had been in business for nearly 60 years. "Are you hungry, Elmer?" "You know me, Sheriff. I's always got me an appetite," he said, leading the way. The diner was only about half full and Elmer and I got a booth that gave us a small amount of privacy. The waitress came by and I ordered a tall coffee while Elmer asked for a hot cup of cocoa. It was only about 3 degrees out today, which was unseasonably cold for mid-November. So I would imagine the cocoa would taste and feel good to Elmer. The waitress returned shortly with our coffee and cocoa and was ready to take our order. "Nothing for me, thanks," I told our waitress. "Ain't you gonna eat nothing, Sheriff?" Elmer asked. "No, but that's fine, Elmer. Go ahead and get whatever you want." Elmer just nodded his head and proceeded to order a bowl of chicken noodle soup, a breaded pork tenderloin, French fries, and a large cola to wash it all down with. He politely asked if he could order dessert if he was still hungry, and I told him, absolutely. The waitress took our order to the kitchen, leaving Elmer and I alone in our booth. After a minute or two of silence, I decided to break the ice. "Do you have any idea why I wanted to talk to you, Elmer?" Elmer just nodded, avoiding any eye contact with me. "And why is that, Elmer?" Elmer thought for a bit before answering. "'Cause you in some kind of trouble with Sheriff Roberts?" I sat up straight in my booth. "Who told you that?" "Sheriff Roberts picked me up a while back, took me for a ride. Said you was in trouble for the way you treated me when yous arrested me dat time," he said softly. "Said you was in trouble for some other stuff, too, but he never say what. He tell me dat if I don't want to be in trouble that I gotta do what he say, and say what he tell me to say." Elmer began. "Go on," I encouraged. "Dat's about it," he said. "Just said he keep me out of trouble if I do what he say." "Did he offer to do anything to try and help you, Elmer? Offer to get you a place to stay? Some money? Anything?" "No," he replied dejectedly. "Nobody ever helped me. Nobody helped when I got kicked out of school. Nobody helped me when I come home from the jungle. Only person ever try helping me was when you took me to jail to get me out the cold." I couldn't help but smile a bit at that. Even though I arrested him, Elmer could still see that I only did it to help him and take care of him. Might not be the most ethical thing in the world to do, but it was the humane thing to do. Elmer's food came, and he ate in total silence for the next 15 minutes. He savored every single bite. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder how a man like that finds the will to wake up every morning. He had no family in the area that I knew of. The problem was that I wasn't sure I knew how to do something to help him without him thinking that I was only in it for me. If I was going to do anything, it had to be something long-term. Elmer finished eating and ordered a slice of apple pie and ice cream for dessert, along with another mug of cocoa. Before we left, I ordered another sandwich and a bag of chips for Elmer to take with him. I could sense that Elmer was grateful for the meal and uncomfortable about being asked to throw me under the bus for Bud Roberts. But I also knew that he was afraid of going to jail for a long time, too, which Bud would undoubtedly try to coerce him with if he didn't play along. Even though he was homeless, Elmer still wouldn't trade his freedom for it. I offered Elmer a ride to the shelter for the night, which he refused. He simply took the bagged food from the diner and left. All the way back to the hotel, I kept thinking about him and what I could do. The poor guy hadn't gotten a fair shake in his whole life. Red River Falls was a town of about 30,000 people, but there were only about 150 or 200 black people who lived in the entire city. That shouldn't mean anything, but we all live in the real world and not fantasy. Well, except for Bud and Clarissa, apparently. Elmer was expelled from high school. He'd been homeless and in and out of jail for most of his adult life. Never gotten or asked for a handout the whole time. Ever since he got back from the jungle, he said. The jungle? The jungle? Of course. The jungle. Elmer was in his late 60s. That means he is exactly the right age to have served in Vietnam. If Elmer was a Vietnam veteran, there might be a ton of ways that I could help him. I made a mental note that night before I went to bed to make a phone call to the Mason County Veterans Affairs office first thing in the morning. If anyone could help Elmer, it would be Rosetta Dirksen at the VA office. I called the boys that night feigning as though I was still in Minneapolis at the conference. It was obvious that Clarissa hadn't told them anything. They had a great weekend with their cousins, which I was extremely grateful for. I polished off the second half of the bottle of wine I had gotten the night before and drifted off to sleep with the thought of helping Elmer on my mind. Sleep came surprisingly easy. I woke up with a splitting headache the next morning, which was odd since I hadn't the morning before. At any rate, I was on a mission to try and regain some control over my life. Helping Elmer Suggs was the first step on that journey. I arrived at the VA office right at 8 o'clock Monday morning. I caught Rosetta as she was arriving for work. She didn't have any appointment scheduled until 9:30, and I literally begged her to give me some time. When I told her it pertained to Elmer Suggs, she ushered me in right away. I have been trying to find Elmer for years, Rosetta said. I actually have an outstanding disability compensation and pension claim for Elmer. He has finally been approved for his full benefits. The words were music to my ears. What kind of benefits does he qualify for? I asked. Elmer is a Purple Heart recipient for one thing. Secondly, he has been approved for 100% disability rating for PTSD, Agent Orange exposure, and multiple shrapnel injuries. The claim is over 10 years old, but he would at least receive back benefits for 1 year. Not to seem greedy or anything, I prodded. But how much would he get, exactly? He's been rated for 100% disabled, so he would qualify for about $3,000 a month in disability pension. With a 12-month retroactive payment, he would receive his first check for about $36,000. Plus, he qualifies for full medical benefits through the VA that will almost provide him with free health care for his service-connected issues and reduced expenses for everything else along with his Medicare benefits. Holy shit, I thought. All of this could set Elmer up for the rest of his life. He is a decorated veteran and will have a definite income for the rest of his life. He would have no trouble being able to afford a place to stay and food to eat. Rosetta said that representatives of the VA and the American Legion would provide as much assistance as necessary to get Elmer off the streets and into a safe, comfortable environment. I left Rosetta's office after almost an hour visiting with her. I was absolutely giddy. If I could facilitate all of this and pull it off, it would at least take Elmer out of Bud's sphere of influence and into mine. Rosetta wanted me to try and get Elmer into her office yet today if I could find him. I spent the next 2 hours trying to track him down, starting over at the YMCA where we had met up last night. I finally found him over at the Salvation Army's Adult Daycare Center, which he wasn't technically supposed to be at. But they were always generous enough to let him come in for free coffee and to warm up for a while. I did just about everything short of kidnapping Elmer to get him to go with me. I got him to the VA office shortly before noon. Rosetta had called all of her afternoon appointments and rescheduled them. We spent the rest of the afternoon in her office arranging for all of his medical care, health benefits, setting up a bank account where he could receive his disability payments, and finally arranging a very nice one-bedroom apartment for him to move into that would be ready at the end of the week. Rosetta also pulled some strings and arranged for a full series of medical exams at the VA hospital in Minneapolis that would also include dental and vision screenings and a full physical workup. He would need a ride to the VA hospital, which I was more than happy to offer. We stayed with Elmer for the rest of the afternoon and evening. Rosetta arranged for Elmer to stay at the shelter for a few days until his new apartment was ready for him to move into. When I got back to my vehicle, I noticed I had missed several phone calls. All of them were from Bud Roberts. I figured I would give him a call and find out what the pig wanted. You planning on coming into work again? Depends. You gonna stop screwing my wife? I'm warning you, Patrick. You've got a hell of a lot more to lose in this than I do. You might not be able to save your marriage, but you can at least save your job and ability to provide for your kids. There seem to be a lot of mights and maybes with you, Bud. Right now I don't trust you any farther than I could kick you. You say I've got a lot to lose, Bud, but I've decided to approach this as though I've got nothing to lose. You've backed a dangerous animal into a corner. You might want to be careful, bud." I could hear him chuckle. "What do you think you have that I should be afraid of, Patrick?" I smiled as I spoke. "I've got Elmer, Suggs." And then I hung up the phone. I spent the rest of the week doing what I could to help Elmer get squared away. The local group of Vietnam Veterans of America heard about Elmer and seriously took him under their wing. When they heard how long he had been homeless and without support, they vowed to make sure that he was never without either again. It was amazing to see them rally around one of their own. Thursday morning, I picked up Elmer from the homeless shelter. He looked like an entirely new man. He was showered, shaved, had a fresh haircut, and a completely new wardrobe that his fellow vets had bought him. Elmer was just beaming for most of the ride over to Minneapolis. It had been years since he had set foot outside of Red River Falls. He only had a few teeth left in his head, and part of the plan was for him to get a complete set of dentures. We spent Thursday afternoon and all Friday getting Elmer through his exams and appointments. I took some time for myself while I was back in Minneapolis and decided to hit up the Mall of America to pick up the presents for Nick and Jake that I had originally planned on getting while I was here for the conference. Elmer stayed overnight in a medical dormitory for out-of-town patients, and I got a room for myself at a Best Western near the airport, which was also close to the VA hospital and clinics. Saturday morning, Elmer and I made the trip back to Red River Falls. Poor Elmer didn't say a whole lot as the dentist ended up removing the few remaining teeth he had. Soon he would have a brand new set of pearly white dentures, and he was looking forward to flashing a full smile again for the first time in years. I dropped Elmer off at his new apartment, which his fellow Vietnam vets had finished preparing for him while we were gone. They really went all out for Elmer in getting him a decent bed, table, and chairs for his kitchen, a small sofa, recliner, dresser, and completely outfitting his kitchen with everything he could need. Some of the items were secondhand, but were probably still better than anything Elmer had seen in a long time. They also stocked his fridge for him while he was gone. A big group of veterans and their wives were waiting for us when we got back. Elmer invited everyone to stay and have coffee with him as his first official house guests. I stayed for a while and had a chance to visit for a bit with Rick Krause, who was the commander of the local VFW and a fellow Vietnam vet of Elmer's. I asked Rick to do me a favor and more or less help keep Elmer out of sight and mind for a while, just until I could get some things squared away. Rick didn't ask me many questions or pry. He only said that there was a group of Vietnam vets who were going to be participating in a 10-day trip to Vietnam in a few weeks. Rick would do whatever he could to make sure that Elmer was on that trip. As I was leaving Elmer's apartment, I had just gotten out into the hallway when I heard him say, "Hey, what's up, Elmer? Need something?" I asked. Elmer struggled to find the words, especially since he still had a mouthful of gauze from removing the rest of his teeth. "I just want to say thanks, Sheriff. Nobody ever done for me what you's doing for me right now." "No, Elmer," I said. "Thank you. Thank you for your service to our country. And I'm sorry it took so long for me to finally figure it out." Elmer just gave me another nod and went back in to rejoin his guests. I spent Saturday night at the Skyline Drive Motel. Sunday morning I slept in late, went to late morning mass, and treated myself to brunch at Perkins before heading back to the farm to feign as though I was just coming home from the conference. The boys were both ecstatic to finally see me after being gone for 2 weeks. Clarissa was absolutely shocked and looked as though she was going to soil herself when I burst in the front door and shouted, "I'm home." I spent the rest of the afternoon and evening with Clarissa and the boys, trying to act as normal as possible for them. It was clear that Clarissa hadn't explained to them what was going on, and for now, it was probably the best. The boys and I spent time assembling the Lego building sets that I had bought for them. They both love Star Wars, so I bought Nick a giant Lego Millennium Falcon, and I got Jake the Lego Death Star. Both items came with almost 3,000 pieces. Assembling the Millennium Falcon alone took us right up until the boys' bedtime. The other toy would have to wait until another night to get put together. I waited until the boys were asleep before leaving. As I was getting ready to leave, Clarissa approached me wanting to talk. "So," she began, "how is this going to work? We can't go on like this forever, Patrick. It is going to be like this until I decide it isn't, Clarissa." "Damn it, Patrick. You know Bud will never accept this, and neither will I. You have to think about the boys. Hell, you have to think about yourself and what Bud is capable of." I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. Before I left, I turned once more to Clarissa. "I think, Clarissa, that maybe you better reconsider what you think Bud is capable of and focus more on what I know that I am capable of. As I said earlier, be careful, bitch," and I walked out the door. I showed up at work the next morning precisely at 8 a.m. No one paid much attention to me, and I simply made a beeline to my office where my secretary Shirley Cunningham had managed to accumulate a nice pile of paperwork for me to go through while I had been gone. I could quickly tell that this was going to be the part of the job I would hate immensely. About 10 o'clock, I was summoned into Bud Roberts' office. Sitting in one of the chairs in front of his desk was the Mason County attorney, Marion Lawson. I had seen him plenty over the years, but had never been introduced to him personally. My spidey sense immediately kicked into high gear. "Patrick, this is our county attorney, Marion Lawson." "Marion, this is my new captain and chief deputy, Pat Quinn." Marion rose from his seat. "Pat, it is quite an honor. We are all proud of you beyond words. You are quite the hero." I blushed at the compliment. Marion returned to his seat. Bud glared at me as he continued on, with a goofy smirk on his face. Marion had the same smirk. All of a sudden, his compliment didn't seem so genuine. "Marion will be working pretty closely with you at times, and I thought you two should get acquainted." "Oh, if you'll excuse me, I gotta run a quick errand. I'll be back in a sec." I stood there sheepishly while Marion eyeballed me from his seat. "You know, Patrick," he said with that goofy smirk, "I had the pleasure of getting to know your wife a while back. Bud introduced us during a Trails Committee meeting." My eyes narrowed as he spoke. "Your wife is an incredibly beautiful woman. You've got quite a handful there. You're a lucky man, Patrick." "Yes, sir. A lucky man indeed." "Why are you speaking to me about my wife like that, sir?" Now Marion sported a full shit-eating grin. "Let's just say, Patrick, that it has been a real pleasure getting to know your wife." The way he had said pleasure told me all I needed to know. So Bud Roberts was sharing my wife with the county attorney. I could feel the blood boiling in my veins. I desperately wanted to gut this man like a deer right now. No sooner had that thought entered my mind than Bud reappeared in the office. Did I miss anything exciting while I was gone? Bud and Marion shared a knowing look and smile. That'll be all, Patrick. You can return to your desk now," he said as though he had just finished scolding a child. I balled my fists in the most intense anger I had experienced since finding out about the affair. All I could do was just turn and make a beeline for my desk. This was not the place for a confrontation. I sat and seethed to myself in my office for the rest of the day. Every time I felt like I was getting a handle on this whole situation, Bud or Clarissa would do, or say something that seemed to set me back. The affair was one thing as long as it stayed between me, Bud, and Clarissa. But now there was an outsider involved, Marion Lawson. Clarissa had gone from refusing me sex to having an affair with Bud, and was now apparently turning into a bitch for Bud and his close friends. Emotionally, I was being destroyed one salvo at a time. I made a beeline back to the farm after work and spent the evening with the boys again. I could tell that Clarissa desperately wanted to get the hell out of there while I was in the house, but even she could see how happy the boys were to spend time with me. She spent most of her time in our bedroom watching TV while the boys and I hung out downstairs. I stayed until the boys went to bed and, again, Clarissa wanted to talk before I left. "Patrick, we need to talk. Please quit ignoring me." "I'm not ignoring you, Claire. What is it that you think we need to discuss?" "We need to figure this out. We can't keep confusing the boys like this. They are old enough to understand what is going on." "Oh, really?" I asked sarcastically. "So does that mean that you want to explain to them how their own mother betrayed their father by screwing their father's boss for the past 2 years, and is now planning on leaving their father so she can eventually divorce his butt and marry the man she started screwing?" "Damn it, Patrick. You know what I'm talking about." Oh, I see," I said. "You want them to know what you want them to know, which is sugarcoating and just leaving out all the parts that make you look like a bitch, a hooker. Calling me names isn't getting us anywhere, Patrick. Communication will, however." I let out a frustrated sigh. "Okay then, communicate. Tell me why? Why would you do this to me? How could you do this to our family? What is it about me that made you lose any and all respect for me?" Clarissa thought for a few moments before answering. "It wasn't about a lack of respect for you. I just fell in love with the power that Bud has. Men respect him. Some people are afraid of him. He would rather be sheriff than a county supervisor or the mayor of Red River Falls. He has a lot of reach, a lot of influence. He got me my committee position on the Trails Committee, got me in touch with a lot of movers and shakers. People respect him. And because of him, people are starting to notice me and respect me, too. I couldn't help that I was attracted to that. And the whole low testosterone thing was just a ruse to get me to back off sexually so you could save yourself for your lover? No, Patrick, I swear. The condition is very real. Dr. Kiesler prescribed me the cream about the same time I started seeing Bud. So, once again, you're willing to do for him what you wouldn't do for me. Nice, I said as I turned to go. What about the boys, Patrick? What about this? You can't just keep barging in here every night. I walked up to her and looked her straight in the eye. This is still my house. Bitch, I will come and go from this house as I damned well please. And I will still be here every night after work and will stay until the boys go to bed. That part is not negotiable. Is that clear, bitch? Bud is not gonna like this, Patrick. We need to work out a little more separation. The boys aren't going to adjust to this if you won't cooperate. This is gonna continue as is until I decide otherwise. And screw Bud, and whatever he wants. If he doesn't like it, he can kiss my butt. I'll be home tomorrow after work as usual. The rest of the week looks to be about the same, and bitch, I promise you, I will make sure you regret everything. I slammed the door a little too loudly as I left and hoped the boys didn't wake up. That is, if they were even asleep in the first place. I dragged my butt into work the next morning and did my best to avoid Bud at all costs. But just after lunch, something happened that would change everything and ultimately become a turning point in my life. About 1:30 in the afternoon, Bud poked his head in my office and told me to follow him. He seemed genuinely concerned and in a professional way. "We've got a situation, Patrick," he said as we entered his office. "Red River Falls PD is on the scene of a standoff at 1830 North McKinley Avenue. A 27-year-old male is holed up in his home with his 5-year-old daughter. Apparently, he was babysitting his daughter while the mother was at work. The couple is ex-boyfriend and girlfriend, and the male involved has been trying to win back the ex-girlfriend. Apparently, things have been getting worse and not better, and today he snapped and barricaded himself in the house with the little girl. No one has had any contact with anyone in the house for over 30 minutes, but PD has reason to believe that both subjects are still in the house and probably still alive." "Has the SOG, Special Operations Group, team been activated?" I asked. "Yeah, that's why I called you in here. You were a member of the team as a deputy. As chief deputy, you now have tactical command of the team." Bud," I said, "I know our standard tactics and stuff, but I've never served as tactical command before." "I'm aware of that," he replied. "But I need you to do this because if you don't, it will just be an excuse for the PD and Chief Banks to try and take over control of the team." So, this was a power play, I thought. Bud was going to send me in because he had to, and because whoever was in control of the team also controlled the budget. The county and each municipality contributed quite a bit of money to operate the SOG team. "You have 15 minutes to get your gear and get down to the scene. The armored vehicles are already on their way, and all of the team members have been paged." "Okay," I said, "I'm on my way." And I turned to leave. "Just one more thing, Pat," he said, walking up to me eye to eye. "In case the thought is crossing your mind about how you can blow this operation just to embarrass me in order to get back at me for everything else going on in our lives, don't. If you screw this up, so help me God, I will bury you for it. You will be finished immediately. You got me?" I chuckled. "As bad as I want to screw you over, Bud, I'm not going to gamble with the life of a little girl to do it. I'm going to get that little girl out of there, and I'm going to take down her father, and I'm going to smile nice and big for the cameras when it is all over with and take all the credit." Bud's jaw just about dropped when I said that last statement, but I took off out the door before he could finish. I quickly changed into my tactical uniform and grabbed my bag of gear. My weapons of choice for SWAT operations such as this were my Beretta 9mm, my Mossberg tactical shotgun, and a Hochler & Koch MP5 9mm assault weapon. I preferred the MP5 for the close quarters fighting, rather than my AR-15. The command center was established 1 block south and 1 block west of the target house. Officers were stationed to provide eyes on the house from all sides and angles to ensure nobody entered or left the premises. Pete Sturgeon, a captain with RRFBD, was waiting at the command center along with the chief of police, Clayton Banks. In total, all of the area homes were evacuated in a 9-block area centered on the target house. 15 officers from the PD, as well as 8 additional deputies and 5 state troopers, were currently staffing the perimeter. A total of 6 additional officers besides me and Pete Sturgeon had responded for tactical ops, 3 deputies and 3 city officers. We had 2 refurbished Vietnam-era Dodge Power Wagons that had been converted to armored vehicles with half-inch steel plating replacing the body panels. We also had a variety of technical gadgetry in addition to our weapons. Powerful speakers and amplifiers were at our disposal for psychological effects, or in case we needed diversion. "No luck getting anyone on the phone?" I asked Pete as I arrived at the command center. "No, we tried repeatedly but no such luck." "Any signs of activity at all?" "Nope, not even so much as peeking out the curtains." "Okay, let's get started then," I said, looking at a computer laptop with a map of the area. "Actually, Pat," Pete Sturgeon started, "I know that this is the first special ops event since you became captain. Chief Banks and I were thinking maybe I should take the lead on this one." "Well, Pete, I'm not going to start a turf war. I have my instructions from the sheriff, and he wants this event handled within the confines of the agreement," I informed them. The agreement was a 28E agreement between the county and the city of Red River Falls establishing the tactical team. The agreement stated that the sheriff's department had overall authority regarding the team, its activation and operations involving the team. Now look, Pat, I cut him off. Pete, Chief, I'm not going to get into this. This is how Bud wants it handled. If the chief wants to butt heads with Bud over this, that's fine. I'm not going to do it. Now let's figure out how we're going to get this little girl back. We need to start gathering intel on the house. What do we know? Sturgeon and Chief Banks looked at each other and realized they weren't going to win. They both knew that the last thing they wanted was the wrath of Sheriff Bud Roberts breathing down their necks. It was probably the only good thing from Bud that I had in my favor right now. Pete sighed. Well, we don't really know much right now. According to the girlfriend, she left the daughter in the home with the boyfriend while she went to work. Actually, he corrected himself. They are ex-boyfriend and girlfriend. Go on, I said. Apparently there was some altercation between them after she dropped the daughter off this morning before she went to work. She became concerned, called the boyfriend. Another verbal altercation occurred over the phone and the boyfriend threatened to harm himself and the little girl. The girlfriend returned to the address and found that all of the doors and windows had been barricaded. She could still hear the TV playing, but no one would answer the phone or come to the door. We're playing this like a standoff since all of the doors and windows have been secured from the inside. Well, the first thing that I needed was a look inside the premises. After trying to make phone contact once myself, I decided that my first tactical decision was going to be to plant optics to try and get a look inside the house itself. I requested that the city engineer bring me any specs and renderings of the layout of the interior of the house. The house itself was a single-story, two-bedroom bungalow that was built in the late 40s. It had an open front porch that led to the living room as you walked in the front door and to the right. To the left inside the front door was a small formal dining room, and a single hallway led to the rear of the home. A bedroom, bathroom, and second bedroom were on the right of the hallway, and the kitchen took up the remainder of the left side of the home as you entered. All in all, the house had a fairly simple floor plan that shouldn't take too much effort to wire for sound and video. The tools we would use for this were a series of small fiber optic cables that would be introduced into the home via high-speed drills. We would need no more than a 1/8-inch drill bit to introduce the cables. The cables would then give us an 80-degree view of any room we introduced them into. The video feed was not broadcast quality, to be sure, but was more than adequate for our purposes. Hopefully, it would give us a solid fix on the location of the little girl and her father and identify whether they were even alive, and well, since no one had spoken to them for over 2 hours. In order to place the cables, I would need an effective diversion. I ordered my 3 deputies on the SOG team, Danny Larson, Chris Hayes, and Alex Landau, to take control of the drills and place the cables. One of the police officers on the team, Kirk Hofelt, would take charge of connecting the cables to a multi-splitter, which would then feed the video to our command center. Everyone would need to work fast, but in our training exercises, these men had previously been able to cable a similar-sized house in under 2 minutes. The diversion would come in the form of high-intensity sound being blasted from the speakers of the armored tactical vehicles. The speakers on the vehicles could blast sound or music as high as 150 decibels, which was just shy of waking the dead. At a distance of 100 meters, a jet engine only tops out around 140 decibels. I assigned 2 other SOG team members, Michael Garcia and Dick Lobeck, from the PD, to handle driving the armored vehicles. My plan was for them to literally drive the vehicles up to the front porch and then immediately start blasting the house with sound waves in an attempt to draw the perp toward the front of the house. The sound would be more than adequate to drown out the sound of the drilling, while the other team members were engaged in cabling the house. Hopefully, the overwhelming sound would be enough to draw the subject towards the front of the house to see what was going on, probably expecting a breach. The subject was one Colton Allen Rigby, age 25. His ex-girlfriend and baby mama was Cheyenne Marie Teasdale, age 23. The daughter was 5-year-old Amber Leanne Rigby. Pete Sturgeon voiced concerns about my plan, saying that he was worried a fake breach could lead to an all-out fight with Rigby. I countered by saying that a fake breach at this point would give us the intel we need, as well as lull Rigby into a sense of complacency, as he would not be expecting a real breach if the situation eventually deteriorated to that point. I was nervous because it seemed as though some of the other team members were latching on to Pete's concerns. I didn't want an all-out mutiny on my hands at this point. I was annoyed with the fact that Bud wasn't here to keep Chief Banks in line and back me up in case Sturgeon really got in my way. But I also couldn't guarantee that Bud would actually do that, regardless. So it was John Wayne time for me, and I needed to act fast and deliberately to keep the team in my corner and keep Pete Sturgeon off me. I placed Pete at the command post so he could monitor the computer and notify me when the cameras were up and running. The armored vehicle was in place, and the speakers and sound system were operating on standby. The placement team was ready, and everyone had radioed in their status. We were all go for the mission. I gave the order to execute. The big power wagons screeched as they took off from their positions and charged down from opposite ends of the street. The placement team was in position at the rear of the adjacent house. The armored vehicles were equipped with a dazzling array of emergency flashers which came on simultaneously. The vehicles stopped with their noses literally touching the front porch steps, and the sound systems blasted to life with 150 decibels of fury with a high-pitched, continuous sound pulse designed to disorient a subject. Immediately, I spotted the front window curtain pull to the side slightly from behind whatever was blocking it. The armored vehicles and the intense sound was having its effect. The cable team was doing their job and finished right about the 1 minute and 45-second mark. The team retreated and I called back the armored vehicles. As suddenly as it had started, the neighborhood was quiet again. I quickly jogged the 50 meters back to the command post where Pete Sturgeon confirmed that we had video streaming from all 6 fiber optic cameras. The cables had been placed perfectly. Within a minute of my arrival back at the command post, the phone I had used to try and call Colton Rigby earlier was now ringing off the hook. I picked up the receiver. "Hey, who the hell is this?" Colton shouted into the phone. "This is Chief Deputy Quinn, Mason County Sheriff's Department. Who am I speaking with?" "Don't even pretend like you don't know who the hell this is, a-hole. What the hell was that bullshit all about, huh? You're scaring the shit out of my little girl, you prick. Please calm down, Mr. Rigby. That event was an effort to try and ascertain if there was anyone in the residence." "Well, I'm home, bitch. What the hell do you want?" "We tried calling you numerous times, Mr. Rigby. That is why we needed to determine if anyone was in the residence. As far as what we want to have assurances that your daughter Amber is okay and unharmed." I tried to remain as calm as possible. Any agitation on my part would only add to his. "She's fine, bitch. As long as you pigs don't try pulling any shit." A threat? And want to be taken seriously. "Why are you barricading yourself in your home, Mr. Rigby?" I wasn't there to negotiate, but I needed to know what his objectives were. "I just don't want to be bothered, dude. I want you pigs to disappear and leave me alone." "I'm afraid we are past that point, Mr. Rigby. Ms. Teasdale has indicated that you may want to harm yourself or your daughter." "That skank doesn't know what I want. I'll tell you what I want. I want you to leave us alone. I want that stupid bitch to drag her nasty carcass over to this house so I can talk to her face to face and get some shit straight. You got that, Kojak?" This guy was starting to annoy me. "I can't send Cheyenne to talk to you if I think you may hurt her, Mr. Rigby." "Yo, bitch, you listening to me? I said I want that hoe on my front porch within the next 30 minutes or shit's gonna go bad. And fast. Get her nasty bum here right now." He was clearly becoming more agitated. His mental state was worse than I thought. "I'll see what I can do, Mr. Rigby, but I need your assurance that you won't harm yourself or your little girl." "I ain't giving you shit, pig. You do what I tell you to do. Got it? And right now I'm telling you to get that bitch over to my house, like 5 minutes ago, pig." The phone line went dead. I walked away from the command center to the staging area, which was located 1 block over from our position. There I found the frightened and distraught Cheyenne Teasdale being attended to by an ambulance crew from the Red River Falls Fire Department. "Ms. Teasdale?" I asked. "Yes." Her eyes were red and swollen. She was an attractive young lady, thin and slightly built with short bob blonde hair and blue eyes, and plenty of tattoos and piercings as well. "Miss Teasdale, my name is Chief Deputy Quinn. I'm leading the response to this incident, and I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions." "I'll do anything if it will help get my daughter back." Cheyenne answered all of my questions with great detail. She and Colton were high school sweethearts, and she had gotten pregnant when she was 17. Neither of them came from the greatest of homes. But whereas Cheyenne had actually tried to make the best of a bad situation, Colton had hit rock bottom and started to dig. Eventually, their relationship ended when Colton became increasingly more controlling and started getting violent with her. Verbally, at first, but it progressed to an occasional slap and backhand after a while. Recently, things had taken a dramatic turn for the worst when Colton had been arrested for possession of methamphetamine, the scourge of Red River Falls. Cheyenne stated that she was going to be petitioning the court for a reduction in his parental visitation rights. I asked her why she dropped her daughter off at his house today if she was going to be further cutting back his visitation rights. The answer? He doesn't work and her regular daycare lady was sick today, and her daughter only goes to preschool 3 days per week. Basically, she was in a jam. Somehow, Colton was informed today by a friend that he could expect to see his daughter less, which would loosen his grip on and ability to control his ex Cheyenne, also confirmed for me what I didn't want to hear, that Colton most likely had firearms present in his home. Some had been confiscated when he got arrested, but she was pretty sure he had others. Please, Mr. Quinn, please get my daughter back. Don't let that son of a bitch hurt her. I'm begging you. Please promise me you'll do for my little girl like you did for that other little girl. I promise you, Ms. Teasdale, I'm going to bring your daughter back safe and sound. I promise. As I walked back to the command post, I wondered if people were starting to build me up into something I'm not. I tried to shake that thought, as well as all of the other crap in my life, out of my head for the meantime. I had to focus on getting the little girl back. When I got back to the command post, I sensed that Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks had been scheming while I was gone. Pat, can I have a word with you? Pete asked, motioning me to walk with him. We walked about 15 or 20 feet from the command post. What's on your mind, Pete? Pat, I think you need to let me take command on this. Why do I need to do that? He paused for a moment. I think you're too new in your position to lead these guys into a situation as tense as this one. I think you need to let a cooler head prevail. I looked around for a moment and saw the rest of the team members watching our conversation. I didn't know if they could hear us or not, and I didn't particularly care. Look, Pete, I said, the first part has gone well so far. We have the house cabled, and we've made contact. We've established that the little girl is unharmed. I've taken the lead on that so far, and I think we've done all right. Now, I need your support and your head in the game if we have to make a breach, Pete. My head is in the game, Pat. No, it isn't, Pete. Not if you're constantly trying to think about how to take command from me. Now let's get back there and go over a plan on how to get that little girl back. I didn't wait for a response and just walked back to the command post. When I got back to the post, the phone was ringing. Captain Quinn, I answered. Where is that skank? Mr. Rigby, it has only been 15 minutes since we spoke. Ms. Teasdale is quite upset right now, as you might imagine. If he was calling this early, it was because he was becoming more agitated and desperate. I don't give a shit, pig. I want that bitch on my doorstep in the next 5 minutes or else. Or else what, Mr. Rigby? His voice grew softer, but very cold. Or else you don't want to know, pig. I'm going to have to go back and talk to her again, Mr. Rigby, and try and convince her to come see you. I need you to give me the full 30 minutes. Silence for almost 30 seconds. Fine, you have another 15 minutes, Dick, and not 1 second more. If Cheyenne ain't in front of me by then, you're gonna need a coroner. A chill ran down my spine as he spoke those last words. Get the team assembled, I said to Pete Sturgeon. We're going for a full breach. Now hold on a second, Pat. What did he say? He wants her there in 15 minutes, or he'll kill the child. And probably himself? Whoa now, Chief Banks said. Did he actually say that, or what? I sighed in frustration. He said if she wasn't there in 15 minutes we would need a coroner. He made a threat, and now we are going to act on it. The rest of the team was assembling on me now. Pat, can I have a word with you? Pete asked. You can ask or say whatever you want in the next 30 seconds, and then I'm going to brief everyone on my breach plan. I really think you need to let me take lead on this, Pat. And I really think you need to shut up and do your job, Pete. Pat, I'm trying real hard to take the high road here. I cut him off. Screw it, I said. You're off the breach team. If I can't trust you to do your job, then you can stay here and man the radio, then. Hey, Brian. I yelled to Brian Keller, one of our deputies and the most recent addition to the SOG team. He wasn't on SWAT duty today, but rather in his regular uniform and helping to man the perimeter. Yeah, boss? He asked, running from his position. Brian, I need you to man the video feed from the target house. I need to know where the adult male and the little girl are at all times. We got 6 cameras set up on the house for each of the rooms we need to monitor. I got it, boss. No problem, he said, enthusiastically. Brian put on his headset, connecting him with our commo, and sat down in the chair at the computer with the video feeds. Now I had someone to give me the intel I would need, who I could trust. Pete was pissed and frustrated. He looked over at his boss, Chief Banks, for support but got none. Neither of them could possibly know how shitty things were between me and Bud right now, and I needed to use that to my advantage. As pissed as they both probably were at me right now, neither of them would be willing to incur the wrath of Sheriff Bud Roberts. At least I had that going for me. I gave a very brief overview of my plan. The 2 armored vehicles would approach the target house from opposite ends of the street on my signal. They would come screaming in lights and sirens and damn near park right on the front porch of the house. Entry charges would most likely be used on the back door of the house to force our entry. The conical-shaped charges would blast the wooden rear door of the house, and anything barricading it, outward and lessening the chance of injuring anyone on the inside. especially the little girl. The two armored vehicle drivers got in their rigs and drove off to their assigned positions. The entry team consisted of me and 4 other men. The breach team was 2 men stationed on either side of the rear porch steps who would apply and detonate the entry charges, and then immediately fire 2 flashbangs down the hallway and into the living room, provided that Rigby was in that location. Once the breach had been forced, the entry team and I would burst in like a freight train, clear the building, take Rigby into custody, and rescue the little girl. We moved in a single line, weapons at the ready. The formation is called a stack and is the way we enter a building on a breach. I was in the lead of the stack, followed by 4 other men. Danny Larson was the last man in the stack and provided our rear security. We formed up near one of the adjacent houses and out of sight of the target house. I needed an update on the situation. Video. This is breach. What do you see, Brian? Breach. Video. Suspect is still in the front room. He is now holding something. Stand by. About 5 seconds later, Brian got back on the channel. Breach. Be advised that the suspect in the front room is holding an object that appears to be a sawed-off shotgun. Shit. We waited too long humoring his bullshit, and now he's had time to get a weapon in his hands. Good copy. All team members, this is Quinn. Stand by for immediate breach on my signal. I slowly counted backwards from 10 to 0. It was as much to calm myself as it was for the men on my team to get themselves ready. Video. Where is the little girl? Breach. The little girl is still in the closet in the first bedroom to your left as you enter from the rear of the house. I would need to see that Brian gets some kind of special recognition for this. He was doing exceptionally well for something he hadn't been trained for. Initiating breach. APC 1 and APC 2. Go, go, go. I could hear the squeal of tires as the 2 heavy armored vehicles made their run toward the house. The air suddenly filled with the deafening sound of sirens and other electronic noise jettisoned from the speakers on the armored vehicles. Set the charges now. The 2 SOG team members at the rear of the house slammed their cone-shaped charges into the wooden storm door and immediately retreated to the side of the house to get out of the way of the blast. When I could sense that the armored vehicles reached the front door of the house, I yelled into my mic, "Blow the doors now." The concussion from the entry charges nearly tried to steal the air from our lungs, and the back door of the house, as well as the remnants of an old oak table, disintegrated into splinters that showered the backyard garden with debris. The 2 SOG team members then pulled the pins on 4 flashbang grenades and threw them down the length of the interior hallway leading to the front of the house. Boom, 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 boom. The blasts and concussion were so loud that it blew out nearly every window in the front half of the house. My team and I immediately stormed the house from the rear entry. I held my MP5 straight out in front of me as we charged slowly but methodically through the bluish haze of smoke from the flashbangs. I made my way to the front living room and dining room where I saw an obviously disoriented male on his hands and knees on the floor. The male subject looked up at me and immediately tried to make a grab for the unmistakable form of a sawed-off shotgun about 3 or 4 feet away. The concussion of the flashbangs must have made him drop the weapon. Police. I yelled. Get down on the floor. Now. I didn't want to kill this man if I didn't have to. In the split second that I realized what he was groping for, I somehow had the presence of mind to grab my yellow X26C taser gun from the holster on my right leg. I drew down on him in one smooth motion and fired the 2 metal barbs from the non-lethal weapon, one of which embedded itself into his left shoulder and the other grabbed into the left side of his neck. The 1,200-volt shocks from the taser pulsed in 19 times per second, which elicited a shrill and blood-curdling scream from Rigby, causing him to go rigid as a baseball bat and then flop face down on the living room floor. I immediately pounced on Rigby, driving my knee into the back of his neck and keeping him pinned down. The second officer to enter the house behind me was State Trooper Ken Flatness, who immediately brought Rigby's hands behind his back and began cuffing him. From behind us, I heard 3 men yell out, "Clear!" They signaled that the rest of the house was free of any other armed subjects. Danny Larson had been the last to enter the house and found the little girl hiding in the closet in her bedroom, crying profusely, with her hands tight to her ears. She was frightened beyond belief, and our appearance didn't help. We were dressed from head to toe in all black clothing with black helmets, goggles, black balaclavas, a ski mask-looking hood to subdue our identity, black ballistic vests, black knee and elbow pads, black military-style shirts and pants, and black combat boots. Oh, and we were all armed to the teeth with pistols, tasers, and assault weapons. Ken Flatness and I immediately patted down Rigby to make sure he wasn't carrying any other weapons. Rigby was still dazed from being tasered, and Ken complimented me for my restraint and not shooting the little prick. Another officer secured Rigby's sawed-off shotgun and emptied the chamber and magazine. The weapon had indeed been loaded with heavy buckshot, which was nearly my second close encounter with the deadly ammo this year. Needless to say, I had a healthy respect for the weapon. I keyed the mic on my headset and spoke. All personnel, this is Chief Deputy Quinn. Be advised that the building is secure. Suspect is in custody. I heard acknowledgement from everyone on the radio channels, and the blaring of the sirens and noise from the armored vehicles immediately stopped. We did a precursory and quick search of the premises to ensure there were no other booby traps or other surprises, and were glad to find none. We stood Rigby up to see if he was finally regaining his composure. As we did so, we could see that Rigby had pissed himself from being tasered. I informed Brian Keller that we were making an egress from the building and heading back to the command post, and requested that paramedics meet us there to check over Rigby and remove the barbs from the taser. Before we left the house, I went over to Danny Larson and retrieved the little girl, Amber, who had stopped crying but was obviously still terrified. I took off my helmet and balaclava and handed them to Danny and slung my MP5 across my back. "Hi, there," I said, doing my best to be congenial. "My name is Patrick. What's your name?" "Amber," she said between sniffles. "How would you like me to take you to see your mommy, Amber?" She just nodded and grabbed onto my neck for all she was worth and put her head down on my shoulder. We exited the front of the house after removing the oak and china hutch that had been blocking it previously. I couldn't help but feel extremely triumphant as I carried my little hostage victim back to her waiting mother. Shameful, I know, but I needed a victory after everything I had been through. It had been my first experience in command of a hostage rescue situation, and it had gone off without a hitch, except for Pete Sturgeon's bitching. I knew that all of the news cameras and reporters would be waiting at the staging area, and I knew they would all be capturing pictures and video of me. It was an opportunity for me to have the experience of reuniting a mother and daughter, but it was also a chance for me to really shove it up Sheriff Bud Roberts' butt. Same thing for Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks. As we approached the command post, Brian Keller got up and shook my hand and said, "Great job, boss." "Great job yourself, Brian. Couldn't have done it without you." Which was absolutely true. Pete Sturgeon and Chief Banks just looked at me with complete and total envy, jealousy, and rage as we walked on by. I couldn't help but wear a half smile, half smirk. I needed this. I really did. As we rounded the corner and approached the staging area, the crowd literally erupted in cheering. Little Amber lifted her head up as soon as she heard it. "Why are they yelling like that?" she asked. "Because they are cheering," I replied. "They're cheering for you because you're the bravest little girl they've ever seen." My comment elicited a smile from her. We got close to the police barricade and the officers in charge let Cheyenne Teasdale come running to her daughter. I handed Amber to her mother, who took her and fell to the street clutching her and crying hysterically. After a few minutes, I helped her stand up and guided her back to the staging area where paramedics were waiting to look her over and make sure she was okay. Cheyenne hugged me like she was never going to let me go and thanked me profusely. I could hear the clicking of dozens of cameras, and numerous reporters were shouting at me and wanting me to come speak to them. I told them that a press conference would eventually be scheduled to go over the details and that I was unable to answer any questions at this time. I turned around and started walking away when someone caught my eye. I looked over at the edge of the police line and saw a beautiful young woman in blue medical scrubs standing there. It was Shannon Sullivan. She had a huge smile on her face and slowly shook her head as I approached her. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" I said, beaming from ear to ear. "And aren't you just the knight in shining armor?" she replied. "What on earth brought you down here?" I asked. "I knew that you would be in on this as soon as I heard it on the news. I worked an extra shift today and got off work at 3. I only live a few blocks from here. Plus, I wanted to see you succeed and see you in your moment of triumph. And so, here I am." Wow, I thought. Someone who actually believed in me. What I wouldn't give, no. I put that thought out of my mind. If only my wife saw me the way Shannon did. We spoke for a few more minutes, and then I could sense that some of the TV cameras and newspaper photographers were staring at us and beginning to take pictures. I knew exactly what they would do next, which was to tie me in with Shannon and tie Shannon in with this standoff. I would love to chat longer, but I've still got a mountain of paperwork to go through, and I'll probably be here most of the night. "I totally understand," she said. "Congratulations on a job well done, Patrick. You'll always be my hero," she said tenderly with that amazing smile of hers. I reached out and took her hand and squeezed it, smiled, and then turned to go. I didn't want to. I would easily spend the rest of the night talking to Shannon, but I couldn't. Back at the command post, Colton Rigby was getting frisked and shook down one final time before being hauled off to jail. Brian Keller asked for and received the honor of giving Rigby a ride to the county jail and getting him booked in. Before he left, though, Rigby had a few choice words for me. "You didn't have to tase me, pig. You were reaching for a loaded shotgun," I replied calmly. "You're lucky you didn't get shot a dozen times." "Yeah? I'm gonna beat the rap on whatever charge you throw against me, pig. And when I'm out, I'm gonna come looking for you and get me an evil on your bum, bitch. Whatever charge." Jesus, Colton, you make it sound like you're only going to get charged with one. If you're gonna come after me, you gotta beat all of them. And that includes the federal charges. Right now you're looking at a minimum of 20 years, dude. Bullshit. I know how it goes. You're gonna try to get me to roll, and I'll only do maybe 3 to 5 at the most. You make a shitty jailhouse lawyer, Colton. You're forgetting one thing. There's no parole allowed in the federal system. If the judge gives you 20 years, you're going to serve every last day. And truthfully, you offer us absolutely nothing as an incentive to reduce your charges in the least bit. I know Lane Danielson, the U.S. attorney for this area. He has a 97% conviction rate. You will be absolutely no challenge for him to put away. Your daughter will damn near be old enough to be a grandmother by the time but gets out of prison. The smirk Colton had been wearing while he was talking tough to me disappeared. The look of street-tough determination was replaced with a look of fear as Brian Kelly shoved Rigby in the back of his cruiser. I distinctly remember seeing a tear stream down his face as the cruiser pulled away and headed for the county jail. I couldn't really concentrate on my duties the rest of the night. I wasn't sure what I was feeling most, an adrenaline high from an incredibly successful rescue, or the high that I felt from seeing and talking to Shannon. I didn't get off the crime scene until almost midnight. As much as I wanted to go home and see my boys, they would have been in bed for hours at that point. Instead, we turned over official control of the scene to the State Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and I called it a night. Even the drive back to my rat's nest of a motel didn't bother me, and I didn't need a drop of alcohol to fall into a deep and dream-filled sleep. I didn't dream of crack houses, meth heads, or any other scum. Instead, I dreamed of Shannon. The next morning I arrived for work fashionably late, strolling into my office around 10:30 or so. Bud was waiting outside his office as I strolled in. "Jesus," he said, "I was beginning to wonder if you were ever going to show up at all." "I figured I earned a little comp time from yesterday," I replied. "Don't get cocky, Patrick. And don't get too liberal with the comp time either. You're still expected to put in a full day like the rest of us," he snorted. Oh, I see. Kind of like the full day you put in yesterday at the hostage standoff." "Yeah, right. If I didn't know better, I'd think that Chief Banks and old Pete Sturgeon genuinely missed you yesterday. Your absence was decidedly noticed." Bud's voice lowered considerably. "I'm warning you, Patrick," he growled. "Don't screw with me." "Or what?" I dared. "Or you know exactly what," he hissed. "This can still end really, really bad for you, Patrick. You may not be chief deputy for as long as you think. You're still just a little junkyard dog on a chain, and I'll yank that chain and strangle you with it." I looked around the office. Fortunately, none of the deputies or other office personnel seemed to notice our little sidebar conversation. "Oh, yeah, Bud? Just exactly what do you think you're gonna do, anyway?" Bud straightened up and a wicked smile crept across his mouth. "Like I said before, Patrick, let's just agree on the fact that whatever I decide to do is inevitable." You know, Bud, I'm not so sure. I think maybe I'm starting to feel a little momentum shift here. After all, I'm the guy who just saved the life of yet another little girl from a deranged lunatic. That's 2 in the last 6 months. Impressive, huh?" I smirked. "You know, Patrick," Bud said, smiling like a fox, "I'm gonna let you have this little victory. Go ahead. Enjoy it. Hell, I'll even admit that you deserve it. But in the end, nothing's changed. This still ends the way I decide it ends. So go ahead and pat yourself on the back. I'm still the head dog in charge. And don't forget it." He turned and went into his office. All I could do was just grit my teeth and head into my own office. I really wanted to punch him in the throat right now. Somehow, my thoughts returned to something I had said about him not being at the hostage standoff yesterday. Wow, if he was, by some chance, stepping out of the office to bang my wife while I was going after a lunatic meth head holding his own daughter hostage, I would have more than enough to totally screw over Bud and my soon-to-be ex-wife. The only problem was how I would go about it. Dear listeners, the next part will be out shortly.